Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we're going to do our best to get through some of these tech issues on tonight's show. But I think there probably isn't anything more fitting than chaos, given the circumstances that the United States is in right now. Why not have this show be a little bit chaotic tonight? First of all, I just want to ask all you fellas, how you doing? I know we're got some people who are in, a little closer to urban areas than I am. So why don't we go around the horde? Brian, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I've kind of gotten myself busy doing what I can, but due to the nature of my job and the risk of coronavirus, I'm not going out to protest, even though I want to. But I've been pretty busy doing what I can otherwise. So it's as much as I can do. And Seattle area, I feel like, is still probably one of the better areas in terms of the relationship with the police and the protesters. We've had some excessive use of force, and we've had some pretty heavy protests and frequent issues. But it's on the tail. It's winding down, and I'm really impressed with the job the mayor, the governor, and even our head of police is doing here.
You also are in an area which has had a history of outside influence. So I think they're particularly well groomed to deal with circumstances like that because of Seattle's fairly complicated history of rioting.
Yeah.
How about you there, Steve?
Again, with coronavirus. I mean, we're still quarantined more or less at the house. We haven't gone anywhere. We don't really go out much. And Winston's not exactly a hotbed of activity, although there have been protests here. And there's been increased police presence. We have helicopters from the news as well as from police constantly circling overhead, which is not something that's normal for a town like Winston-Salem. Charlotte, obviously, which is about 80, 90 miles away from me, has had a lot more activity. It is it's an interesting city. It was clearly a very segregated city for most of its history up until we're talking really recent. North Carolina is an interesting bird when it comes to that. And also during the Ferguson protests and riots, we actually did have a lot of civil action, a lot of activity there, and we also had a lot of pushback from some people in town. It's very difficult. It's a fast-growing city with a lot of people from all over the country. So there's a lot of different perspectives. Some of them I very much do not agree with, and I don't support. That are still here or came here, that are making things difficult. But the past couple of days have seen more peaceful action. We had something in Asheville, which again is not very close to me, but Asheville had an incident on Tuesday where police accosted a medical station that had been set up on one of the streets there, basically confiscated or destroyed medical supplies, took knives to all the water bottles that were being handed out, and generally just pushed around and verbally abused the EMTs and medical personnel who were there setting up just basically a safe station and a medical station for anybody who was affected by tear gas or otherwise or whatever. And there was some pushback from the Asheville police at first, saying that never happened. But when you have so much video that's put out immediately, either live streamed or like within 5 minutes of the occurrence, or is being circulated live, it didn't take long for even the mayor to come out and express, just disgust at this. So it's not. I think we're in a very interesting position right now nationally where there's a lot more eyes and a lot more people are making use of the cameras. that they have. And so I think it's easier to counter some garbage grumbling, saying it's just the protesters being violent, when there are numerous examples of peaceful protesters either kneeling or standing with their arms up, getting shoved around, beaten, tear gassed, shot at, just for being there. Kind of counteracts that narrative of like, it's a whole bunch of agitators that are just causing havoc. It's like, no.
Okay, Caleb, first of all, congratulations on your first employment in the legal profession.
Yay!
So congrats on that. Now throwing over to you. How's your week been like?
It's better now. This just seeing you guys has helped immensely. So yeah, started a new job this week, and that's kept me really busy. But Little Rock is not isolated or immune from what's happening in the world, and Little Rock in particular has a very, I don't know if unique is the right word, but it's got a very storied history with Black Lives Matter, but with the segregation movement. If you ever get a chance, Google Little Rock Central High School and the Little Rock Nine. It was one of the major desegregation moments in the South. That scene where the little girl is walking into the school and the angry white woman is behind her. That's my city. It's been rough. It's been really emotional because so I've gone down and I've protested some this week in the midst of starting the new job, and I've seen some of what's happened. I've been amazed at the people around me and how much they care, and partially because this is, I'm a baby lawyer. I just finished my first year at law school, and so really seeing how public policy matters and how public policy has a role to play in this, but also how my fellow classmates have responded and have really turned out in support has been incredible. And so I'm the president of my law school's LGBTQ straight alliance. It's called Outlaw, and so I've been busy with that, making sure that the kids who are at the protests have access to information they need, and helping, getting contacted with lawyers who are working pro bono. There's a lot of folks, myself included, who are going to be working as what's called legal observers. So essentially, what those people will be doing is heading out, kind of staying on the sidelines, but with cameras, documenting and using it for work product for pro bono lawyers, for people who are being represented for free. I've seen a lot of that. And again, this is people acting outside of their interaction with law school. I'm not saying this in representation with even Outlaw or with the law school. It's just people who that happen to also be there are really turning out. People who are fellow law students and who are active got tear gassed while they were sitting on the Capitol steps with their legs crossed, chanting. Friends of mine, and knowing that, and I wasn't there, I didn't witness that, but knowing that happened is heartbreaking. But I really am hoping. I'm hoping we're seeing a nationwide shift and a nationwide change in both the rhetoric and in the understanding, and in the people who are walking away from asinine, idiotic statements like the facetious "all lives matter" thing, and the willingness to find the quote unquote "but" at the end of, I'm not racist, but, or sure they're protesting, but, or I think I understand, but, like, people are just like, I really do think we're starting to see the majority of people get away from that. And so while on one hand it's disheartening and it's heartbreaking, and I'm just a white dude who lives in Arkansas, and I don't know what it's like to be black, and I don't know what it's like to have that experience, it has made me really proud of my community that we are also starting Pride Month right now, and I have not seen anybody taking advantage of that to steal a spotlight. if anything, there's the at least the people in my circle, which I realize we live in a bubble. It has been it has made me feel good to know that my community is not trying to derail the conversation and that they are using it as a platform to go even further, and they're saying, hey, black queer lives matter,
Hmm.
and not try to pull back on anything. So
Yeah.
that's it's heavy. Like I'm like, from my perspective, it's heavy, and
Mhm.
that's okay because it's supposed to be, because it's not supposed
Yeah.
to be comfortable.
No.
Yeah.
And I do believe we're going to get through this. It's just got it. It feels like I'm waiting to exhale, if that makes sense, and it feels like
Mhm.
my entire city is waiting to exhale. Um, so
Yeah. Um, though I am um, suburban, um, I'm not too far from Trenton, and have spent a good amount of time in my life between law school and work in Newark. Everybody's pretty familiar with the Newark 1967 riots.
yeah,
Um, it hasn't been. We haven't had any incidents apart from a couple in Trenton. Um, Cops have not been trigger happy. I also live in a state where there's a very heavy percentage of people of color on police forces. I know that not every community can claim that. So it's been relatively calm in New Jersey, in the areas that I've had my eye on. Princeton's been interesting because it usually is a protest center, but with the students not there physically, it has a very different feel. I know um, if this were normal, I don't even know what normal is anymore, or if we even ever had it. But I know if this were a circumstance where we did have students at Princeton University, that we probably would have seen a lot more activism. But there's still a healthy dose in enclaves like Hightstown. I'm very much in the same camp with things that have been discussed here about the concern about going to an event and the threat of infection. Um, and I think because of that, I don't think I've ever been as outraged at Trump as I was for that photo op. Um, that probably was the most I've ever been incensed. Not just because of the sheer stupidity of it, but also to discharge tear gas at a time when people should, you know, again, you're not supposed to be singing, you're not supposed to be shouting at this time. um, there's a particular kind of cowardice to that, and a particular kind of evil to that function.
He's
Says I'm
being
unstable there. I'm just gonna wait.
he's being called
Yeah,
out too by like
yeah,
Mattis and now Kelly and Murkowski, and like I do feel like this
Usually.
has unfortunately been that
yeah,
moment that we knew needed to happen. Not that it should happen under these circumstances,
yeah,
where finally a bridge too far.
yeah.
Even Pat
yeah.
Robertson called him out, about
Yes, that was, and that
Shocked
was
me.
really interesting. Yeah, that. I'm sure Susan Collins is concerned.
She almost furrowed her brow
Yeah,
twice
She's
I'm
yesterday.
sure
questioning
she's
that lesson that
concerned.
was supposed to be learned. She's wondering.
She's
She's
wondering.
not sure
She's
yet. She'll let you know.
Uh, Yeah, and with the things that we've talked about, like there was one point during this week where I was like, should we even bother having a show? It's just,
Yeah.
I think Caleb assigned the appropriate tag to it as heavy.
yeah.
That we are a show that's dedicated to something that is escapism. Where does that play with circumstances where there's so much preoccupation with literally the direction of our nation?
Hmm.
And um, I don't know. It's just, I do think that fucking photo that's gonna be the defining image of his presidency, and I'm glad it's something as stupid as fuck as that.
One
But
hopes.
like seriously, like I have rarely gotten as angry. That's the angriest I've gotten in the last 3.5 years. God knows there's been a lot to be angry about.
He's making me agree with George Bush.
Right?
Like,
I'll-
fuck you.
Oh,
Making me agree with George Bush.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable to me that this is finally the thing. The church stunt is the thing that people are losing their mind over. Like, I mean, and not you, Bill. I'm talking about more of my religious family and friends,
yeah.
Because, like, I still.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that they're seeing through that nonsense.
I can't
and that
say
noise.
that
That's
it's
great to hear.
It's 100%. It's certainly not 100%. But, like, I had conversations with my mom, who is not a Trump supporter. This is the thing I'm realizing more and more as I talk to people. Nobody really, few people like Trump. They like what he has done, but they don't like him. And so there's this weird cognitive dissonance that I keep encountering where, like, my mom or her husband said something like, all we need is one more Supreme Court justice and then he can go away. And it's like, that's all they care about. At least the people I'm talking to from that religious perspective, because all they care about is abortion. And so it's totally a means to an end, or ends justify the means, I should say. And I think there's these things just chipping away at his not his charisma, his stature. I don't even know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
That stature where he's kind of leaning over all the way.
Because it leans either because of lifts or because he's dealing with some Parkinson's related dementia.
I mean, but yeah, that moment for me as someone who also has a religious background, but also has still a faith in the Christian religion. It is the most disgusting thing you could ever hope to imagine, seeing a political leader holding a Bible in front of a church and effectively saying, we're not going to war, but basically, if you don't take care of your problems, you weak jerk governors, we're going to send in the army. And it's like, no. And that's why I've been thrilled with the military. Even Esper, who normally has not been the most amazing. He's kind of toady for Trump.
Yeah.
He at least even said, no, that's not what we thought. That's not what we were doing here.
I was surprised at how strongly worded his statement was.
Yeah.
I was very surprised at that because sometimes in the past where you have had people, whether it be Kelly or Odierno, I guess, there was always an out in the statement somewhere. And I wish it was coming from like a less controversial figure like Morrissey. But Morrissey always said he could not write a love song without a get out clause in the third verse. And I think the statements from military leaders in the last 3.5 years have very much been along those lines. There's a get out clause in the third verse. And we're not seeing that, both from former and current. Also take a look at some of the documentation that's leaked from the Pentagon as well. And I really do hope that this is a tide shift. But I'm still terrified that we're not going to have an election either.
Well, I mean, I'm
terrified for that.
I'm more on the side that we will still have an election. It'll just basically be a question of, do you want to put yourself into a situation where in the second wave of COVID infections, you are most likely going to become infected because you're going out and exercising the right to vote. I think a lot of that is going to be a big thing. We're still going to have an election, but will the turnout be reasonable in a presidential election year, which are always heavy turnout years comparatively, not compared to most other countries, but comparatively for the US? Is this going to be one where, it's going to be a very low turnout because of safety, health issues, decreased voting locations, increased lines? I mean, the primaries are a perfect example of what happens, or what could potentially happen. And primaries are a fraction of voters that normally vote during November go to primaries. So even if there's a high turnout for primaries, it's at a fraction of what a presidential turnout would be.
Do any of your states like emphasize vote by mail? I'm actually now in a state in Washington where that's all you can do is vote by mail, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah. North Carolina has always been very positive with remote or absentee voting.
Yeah.
They've encouraged
in New
it for a
Jersey
long time.
In New Jersey, once you get on vote by mail, it's like very difficult to get off.
So it's like the turnpike. It's like their turnpike, right?
Yeah, kind of.
I just remember the Parkway was more fun because you had to throw handfuls of change in a basket and then hope it lets you through. I loved it.
Arkansas has vote by mail. It doesn't encourage it. Arkansas. So I mean, we're a blood red state.
Hey, Tom Cotton.
Yeah.
Somehow
who is running unopposed?
Jesus.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Who will not have a Democratic opponent going into this, and who the only other independent will not be on the ballot, will have to be a write-in because of the way our election processes are working. We also have an ID law where you now have to show your ID. So disenfranchisement is real here. It is. What I will say is the good side of that of our voting system is we have really good early voting, so we can vote for about 14 days prior. So we have about 2 weeks to go vote. And that's about it. Now, there's only a handful of states I'd say that make it harder. That make it harder for their citizens to vote.
I mean, North Carolina is notorious for disenfranchisement and pushing voter ID laws and redistricting in order to benefit Republican, basically Republican Congress people as well as state representatives. I mean, for the past 5 years, we've had our electoral map voted down at the Supreme Court level 5 years in a row, basically being told that this is clearly being done to disenfranchise voters of color. So you have to go back to the drawing board, and then having them go back to the same drawing board, tweak it slightly, and then just hope that they can get the election through, the next upcoming election through before that map is overturned again at a higher court level.
And in saying this and having this conversation, I just want to kind of take it a different route though, because I think a lot of people hear about how much voter disenfranchisement is real in places like Arkansas, and how much, if you live in a blue state, does your vote really matter? If you live in a red state, does your vote really matter? It matters. So please don't take, if you're listening to this show, don't take any of it as as a scary thing or as saying it's not important. Get registered to vote and do everything you can to get to that poll.
If you have early voting in your state, take advantage of it. 100% encourage your family, encourage your friends, encourage everybody who can to take advantage of early voting. Don't wait until the first Tuesday in November if you can avoid it, because that Tuesday is going to be awful. Everywhere in this country right now, every single state, it is going to be huge lines, fewer polling stations, and greater risk for serious infection. Because guess what? It's also flu season too, so overlap. But if you can do it, vote early, vote absentee if your state allows it or encourages it. Just do it. There's no excuse.
Just to talk about Election Day, there is a rumor. Basically, what my company does, 3 other big companies do, without naming names. And there is a rumor that we will be having Election Day off as a paid holiday. So
Nice.
given how corporate America took a far bigger lead on the COVID response than our government has, I'm hoping we see some leadership along those lines. That would be. I mean, in the 21st century, there's no reason that this could not be performed on a Saturday. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, and it just seems that the basic tenet of what America is supposed to be about is we should be encouraging people to vote instead of finding these methods of disenfranchisement. And in a lot of ways, that's the most un-American thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or finding excuses to not encourage better ways of voting. The current, big push to say no, voting by mail is evil and awful and is full of frauds. I mean, we have
But
one.
I did it. Yeah.
We have one proven fraud who actually illegally voted by or tried to register by mail, illegally. But there's much less room for, I think, error. In fact, if people actually paid attention to what the standards are for voting by mail in their state, they'd be surprised at how many safeguards there are and how rare it is that there would be an instance of attempted fraud. More likely it's people who just aren't doing it right, who then their vote doesn't count. But I mean, the whole Tuesday voting on the first Tuesday in November, the only reason it's on Tuesday, I think, what was it? Because people had to go to church on Sunday, and most likely where they had to vote was within a day or two
within a day trip, and plus also the end of harvest seasons in certain areas. So I'm sorry for laughing during what you were saying. I'm very sorry for laughing while you were talking, Steve. But just from a producer standpoint, I'm thinking, right, how the hell do we transition from this to talking about Killowog?
I mean, they got to vote on OO, don't they? Is the Guardians a dictatorship or a junta?
Hey, seriously, the most exciting issues of Legion ever was when you found out who the new leader elected was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of really amazing kind of cartoonish things, hey Bryan, what is on your shirt?
This?
Uh-huh.
This is the Barracorn.
That's how we transition. It's
we should. All right, let's all show our shirts then. I'm Ace the Bat Hound.
I am Exercise, some motivation required.
and I didn't get home and from work in time to change, so I don't have a cool shirt. I'll show off my tattoo and some bare chest. That's not a bare chest. Little something.
It's
Come
a
back
bare
next week.
chest.
Yeah, we'll see what gets taken off next week. Dun dun dun.
Then we have to get the sound effects and the music going. Well, go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, on a positive, I know we mentioned this last week. A lot of comic shops are getting back into the swing of things. Diamond is starting to put out stuff now. So, did anybody pick up anything cool this week as they were going in and around their business?
I looked on Comixology because I thought, there'll be something. No, it's kind of a.
You know me.
I'm setting you up, buddy.
You know me. Betty and Veronica, Jumbo Comics number 283.
So
it's gonna be sad though when we actually do a comics and then like the Archie Digest go bye.
So
it's been fun.
What are they still doing like reprints of old stuff, or do they still do new stuff?
Yeah, the format that they have for the digest, it's almost like the old 100-page super spectaculars that DC had in the 70s. They have a lead-off story which is new, or two lead-off stories which are new, and then the remainder is reprint material. Mm-hmm. And the reprint material, oh Jesus, I'm about to I'll make this point and then plug in. The reprint material is from all ages. They have stuff there from the 90s, from the 80s, from the 40s. They do a nice print. And there's actually one cool digest they have called Archie Milestones, which really goes into some deep dives. I'm just going to plug in. I'm about to lose power on my laptop, so talk amongst yourselves.
I would just be I'd be interested to. I haven't picked up one of those in a long time, even though I've been going randomly to grocery stores maybe more often. I don't know. to see if any of our friends, like Dan Parent, still contribute in any way. I think the last time I picked up some Archie something, I saw him credited. So I'd really love to see if that's still happening. And
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The one thing that I'm sure, unfortunately, probably won't make it in most Archie digests are their really great crossovers. I'm thinking of Alex DeCampi's wonderful Archie meets Predator series, which are absolute gems. If you guys have a chance, if you haven't read them, pick them up. They're hilarious. They're wonderful parodies. They're gory as all get out, but it's a perfect Archie sci-fi horror book. I love it, and it's also campy. I mean, you can't go wrong.
oh, it's fantastic.
What are you talking about?
The stuff that probably won't make it into the Archie digest, the like Aliens, or the RGB Predator, or maybe Archie meets Kiss.
Afterlife.
Like Afterlife probably won't make it. They do have.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I have seen an Afterlife digest before, though.
Yeah, I think there has been one,
There
have been
but
some of the Riverdale digest. There has been some new Riverdale,
I saw.
but they were terming that seems kind of dead in the water at this point.
Yeah.
Kind of like.
But there was a point where there were. Yeah.
When's the next issue of Sabrina coming out?
Just 36 months from now. Yeah.
36 to 47 months.
Did you ask about Sabrina?
What was like? What about Sabrina? I still haven't watched the 3rd season on Netflix.
Was there a
looks
Sabrina
like
issue?
He's going for something. Yes, Something Wicked, which is the 2nd series in that. Who's the writer? Is that
You want me to tell you?
what's her
I'll
name?
tell you.
Who's writing that?
It is the one and
Yeah,
only.
please.
It is the one and only Miss Kelly Thompson.
Kelly Thompson.
Thompson.
Oh, and Veronica
Yeah.
Fish.
Yes. Who did
I love
who was
Miss
part
Fish.
of the Jughead?
Yep.
Jughead the Hunger, which I adored.
She's done amazing covers of like almost every Archie book I think I've seen, since they did that relaunch.
Her and Andy both. So I think it's her. I think it's her husband. I'm not 1,000% sure because I don't know them like that. But I'm pretty sure her and Andy are married, and they're a really, really good dynamic husband and wife team.
Yeah.
Nice. Or maybe they were Luke and Leia and the
preparing-
brother and sister. We don't know.
I am preparing to get a DCBS box eventually, and as I've teased, I have been a comic book Karen, as I put it, kind of nagging, because I just worry from the collector standpoint that if you miss a book now, there's no chance of getting it. I imagine that at least until November, the print runs are going to be fairly small, even on the larger books. So
It'll be like Image in the early 90s.
over the last week.
It'll be Image in the early 90s
got
again for issue 2 and 3 for any book. It doesn't matter. We'll never see it again.
But I don't know about that because those seem to be like artificial, and then eventually, like I'm sure you can get a Cyber Force #2 for $1 at this point.
Now you can.
Yeah. I think these would be unartificial numbers.
Yeah.
So.
At least there are some things I am going to be making down to. I hate calling my LCS because it's not local to me. It's 90 miles away. But the store that I go to, it's just taking belt and anyway, Pennyworth's down in Charlotte that I go to. I'll be picking up the books that came in last week as well as this week, and hopefully, maybe some more trades and some more DC Inc. books because I've been really enjoying what I've picked up so far. I've picked up the Harley Quinn by Mariko Tamaki, the Green Lantern Legacy book that was amazing. Also the latest Raven DC Inc. book that I know they're going to hopefully very soon come out with Beast Boy as the companion book to that.
Yeah.
So And I'm sure there's a bunch more. I've got to get the Ridley Pearson Super Sons books, because now I think they're all out of
No,
that series.
the third one is coming out.
The third one is coming out. Okay.
The first two are out. This is going into the bunker, so you can see a whole bunch of them. Whole bunch of the DC
I need
books.
that one and that one.
The Raven book has sold well enough that they've announced a hardcover version.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah, I believe it's in its 5th printing already. So that's a hit. Yeah.
I'm
over the weekend. That's actually the one book I don't have here. Maybe I do. Yes, I do. I did read one of the ink books over the weekend. This was the Catwoman book, Under the Moon. This is very good. A very mature take on a young Catwoman. Touches on issues of self-harm, stopping domestic violence, animal cruelty. And yet through it all, it's an entertaining book that preaches. I don't want to say preaches, but informs as you read it. So, Steve, I think you would really enjoy this one too.
That's actually on my to-do list for picking up. I know that my stores actually same thing that other stores are experiencing. It does sell well. Those DC ink books have been doing very well for that store, which is great, because like they're not. They do have an all ages section, but it's not the focus. But literally all ages are picking those up. So adults, middle-aged dudes like us, but then also kids who are the presumed target audience for it are picking that up too. So it's good. I'm glad that this initiative from DC finally is really paying off.
And especially one where there hasn't been a lot of hype or fanfare. It's like they're letting the, you can't say imprint now because they're not using the Zoom or the ink trade dress anymore, but letting these books breathe, I think, and letting them find an audience that's outside of the regular comic book audience. I think they've done a very good job. And not all of them land, but the ones that are landing are resonating. So, I mean, did you ever think that DC's highest selling graphic novel of 2019 would feature Raven? You have to, you have to take some chances, I think, with when you are trying to get into a new market or exploit an existing one that you're not, where it still is new terrain for you. And I think they've done a really good job. I think especially because there hasn't been a shitload of hype about them.
Yeah. So I customarily buy my nieces the superhero girls books, or the DC superhero girls books, and they love them. My nieces are 12 and 11, or 11 and 10, 12 and 11 now. I have to go check dates. They're growing. Unfortunately, my babies are getting to be big kids. and they've been mentioning that they still like them, but they want something, like they're starting to feel like they're for kids. Like, kids don't want things that are for kids. I haven't read any of these that are the all ages graphic novels. Do these feel like, I mean, and again, I know we're saying this from kind of middle-aged men perspectives, but do these feel like things that, tween girls would enjoy? Or would they feel
I think, like Raven, particularly the Catwoman book I mentioned, that may be a little bit too advanced for them. But I think the Super Sons book, which does have female characters like Vixen or Vixen's descendant, and that's right at that level. I would definitely see if I think
love
Super Sons would definitely be a good transition from that. Yeah.
Okay, for sure. So they love Super Sons. I actually bought them the first Super Sons omnibus. I know one just came out that has that last maxi series in it, but they like.
Okay. Oh, we're talking about two different things. This is the DC Ink Super Sons.
Gotcha.
Which is a different take on that. and there's the Raven. And I think these would be an excellent transition away from. It's just like one little tiny step up.
Mhm.
They're called there's a general name for the mission, the Foxglove Mission Polar Shield Project, but I think this would be a good transition step.
Okay, cool. Thank
and
you.
Especially if they like the Super Sons book, and also to have a little more female representation.
Cool, and thank you for clarifying that, because I was thinking of the Tomasi
Yeah.
Super Son stuff that I got them,
Still
which
good.
they adored. I didn't realize that there was that's what you were talking about. I was
Yeah.
ignorant to that fact, so I appreciate you clarifying on
Yeah.
that.
But
And
Raven,
the
I would
third
recommend
book
Raven
in that series is coming soon.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think Raven. I think Raven is the next step.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's not as she's a little bit older, but I know that kids that age are probably looking for somebody also would be okay with reading somebody a little bit older that doesn't necessarily have to be overly mature. Whereas Catwoman, I know that's a much more mature book that would be probably more like high school. But Raven, even though the character's in high school, it's kind of like in that junior high era, reading.
I'm looking at Raven. She'd be fine with Raven. I think. I think some of this is colored by Cami Garcia's work on the Harley Joker book.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
which I'm kind of.
It's a little bit different.
I'm kind of forgetting things, and also the Catwoman book is very fresh in my mind, and I lumped Raven in with that a little bit more than I should have.
And don't forget Legacy.
Yeah, Legacy's wonderful.
Because I think those protagonists are like 13, 14, I think. So.
The Green
I see
Lantern
Brian's back there taking out my behind the head flex.
It's a nice way to show off the guns here, right?
Yeah, while they talk about DC Inc.
Oh.
I'll just cut. You just keep.
I have been lifting a little bit. I've been lifting a little bit. A little bit.
Just a little bit. Which way is the gun? Yeah, no.
This is all the curling I've been doing.
I have to reach for this. I'm so foreign to you folks, but I know not everybody who listens to the show follows us on the regular channels of social media. I'm almost 90 days without an alcoholic drink, while everyone else is doing something else.
As we're all drinking alcohol.
No, this was not a goal. This is not an issue in my life. It's just I'm just not doing it.
Yeah.
While we're in.
Well, and you'd mentioned before, Bill, that you just rarely drink at home, and that's just, you're more of a social.
I never
drinker?
drink at home.
You're more of a social drinker, and
yes,
right now
I never drink at home.
It's impossible to be a social drinker. So I mean, that's I applaud you for it.
Also, my parents never did much either. They get hammered down the street, at the Weebers or the Alexudises, but it would be like a drunken walk home, but we never drank it. I only remember one party my parents threw. It was a New Year's Eve party. It was also the first time I got drunk playing Atari. I never remember them doing that. I think it comes from them.
Never seen my parents drink an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah. So my grandmother would get lit, and my grandmother was like almost always lit. And she lived with us for a time before the nursing home. So there was now that I think that may be why my parents did, because they came on both sides. There were heavy drinkers on both sides. So Killowog. Let's talk about Killowog.
Well, I mean, I kind of was wondering if maybe we could talk about books that we've been reading this week. I know we've been kind of talking about that anyway.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I have been really loving two other comics that both of these gentlemen are involved in. One is Rob Guillory's Farmhand. That those of you who've been listening know that I've talked about this a couple times on the show. It's an amazing, really funny, really clever, interesting family mystery drama, sci-fi horror, just fun book that Rob Guillory is both writer and art on. And then also John Layman's Outer Darkness, which, very different feel, obviously from Farmhand, takes place in the far future, dealing with like supernatural horror and sci-fi elements together with some humor, but mostly horror. That Layman has writing duties on. But both of them worked together for years on one of the most popular books at Image for a long time. Certainly, I would say probably one of their better sellers for a while. That I, of course, have completely avoided reading for such a long time, and I don't know why, because I'm an idiot for not starting it. But that is, of course, their book Chew, that Layman wrote. Guillory did the art for several years. I'm not sure the exact total number of issues that they went through, probably about maybe 70 or so, 60 or 70, but they, or possibly even more than that. I know they have a lot of these omnivore editions that are out and available, as well as their sort of omnibus editions, if you're looking to pick them up. But I did start with volume 1. This copy I actually got from Rob Guillory, and he was nice enough to sign it and draw a little picture of Chew for me. But if you're not familiar with this book, and I know I didn't really know much about it until I actually picked it up and started reading it. It's about a police officer named John Chew, who is a Chibopath, which is basically an interesting thing in this world, of somebody who can actually know everything about something that they've eaten. So if he picks up and bites a peach, then he knows the entire history of the vineyard, of the orchard, where it came from, the people who picked it, what pesticides were on it, what worms ate it, anything he will know. It also goes for people too. So if he eats a finger or licks some blood, he knows things that they've been thinking, what happened to them, flashes of their memories, things like that. And in this sort of dystopian, not really dystopian, but very interesting future, following a pandemic of bird flu that has seen the United States completely outlaw all chickens, John Chew is tapped to join the FDA, which is now a government enforcement agency like the FBI, going around and solving major crimes related to the use and abuse and purveyance of chicken. Of course, that's where it starts, and it goes off the rails very quickly. It's such an amazing book. It's hard to describe in so many words, but the characters are hilarious and multi-textured. The circumstances are absurd. I know it gets even crazier in later books, but even in the first Omnivore edition, which collects the first 2 or 3 trades, you go from vampires, sort of alien fruit growing, a political uprising in a small Pacific island country, and all sorts of murder conspiracies and things from the cases that they deal with. And I absolutely love this book. I'm going to continue it. I already picked up volume 2 that came to my house today, so I'm excited to keep reading Chew. Has anybody else read it? No.
I've read what the equivalent of the first 5 issues are.
Okay.
If you remember, a couple of years ago, Mark Millar had a magazine called Clint in the UK, which reprinted some stuff. And again, with the word Clint, if you squeeze your eyes, it looks like another word.
Yes.
So I did read the Chew material that was in there.
Yeah.
Didn't really connect with me. I thought it was novel. I thought the the world building was interesting of the post-pandemic world that you discussed, but it wasn't anything that I would necessarily enjoy.
Well,
I'm glad you're enjoying it, though.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
like when
And
my friends like comics.
I'm surprised you didn't enjoy one of the characters in here. His name.
It didn't have Killowog in it.
It did not have Killowog, but it had a man who was about the size of Killowog. His partner, and in the first arc anyway.
Yeah.
Who is a massive bearish gentleman, who
Yeah.
was also a cheapopath. But yeah.
So I read the first trade
Mhm.
of it, and I absolutely love it. The only reason I didn't read more of it is because I just simply did not have the rest of the trades to read. And that's like I can say that about 17 other series at the same time too. But it truly was it was really energetic, and I, so my like Bill, I have a quote unquote straight husband, a concert husband. That's my my buddy Craig, and he absolutely loves this series. Like he worships the ground these two creators walk on, and he's been trying and trying and trying to get me to read it forever. And he's got great taste in comics, so I've got no excuse for not listening to him. I'm saying that because I know he's going to watch this later, so I got to
Oh yeah.
really make sure I plug it because he loves you guys as well. But
We love Craig.
he it
We
really
love Craig.
it's a fun series. When he was telling me about it, I was kind of worried that it was going to be like he told me the basic premise, right? And I was like, oh, it sounds like it's a little bit derivative of iZombie. So I was kind of worried about that, and that was one of the reasons I postponed. But that was like, let me just say, that was ridiculous of me to do so. That was not fair to the book. That was not fair to the creative team for me to have that kind of a forethought to it, because it was not true at all. It doesn't feel like as you're reading that, you don't think of that premise at all.
No.
And so if you were listening to Steve's pitch of it and you were like, oh, like sounds kind of like iZombie, don't let that be the thing that keeps you from it, because it is truly it's truly nothing you've ever read before.
It does, and it's funny that you mentioned iZombie, because there is that tiny shred of similar DNA.
Yeah.
Where in an iZombie, Liv can eat the brains of a deceased person and then have their memories, or at least experience some of their lives. Here, it's a lot more used as a sort of like a psychic detective, and it goes with anything that gets on him. So like he gets dirt or blood or fruit or chicken or whatever, like anything that passes his lips, he gets the history on, and it's really funny. But there's also a whole mess of other psychic, food psychics that show up in this book that use, superpowers derived from food, that really make it a very interesting world of superhumans that's great. So
One thing I will say, though, it wasn't a series that connected with me. I will say it was an Image series that was fun at a time when not a lot of Image books you could characterize as fun.
Yeah.
So I do think it stood out in that context. Maybe I'll revisit it at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have enough time left in my life, but
it is something like 20 trades.
Yeah.
I think.
So, but I did sample it, but I would say that at the time that it came out, when things were dominated by stuff like Walking Dead, or if there were books that were in that humorous element, they were like really out there, like Orc Stain. It was a fun book when there wasn't a lot of fun at Image. So.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. We'll go over to Bryan. Bryan, what's a book you're reading that you're digging?
So, inspired by, obviously things going on in the world right now, I decided to go back and revisit a book I had started back when it came out in the comics and the floppies. So I went back and I got the first trade for Black, which is from Black Mask Press, or it's Kwanzaa Oseafo and Tim Smith 3. are like the creators, and friend of our show and several of us, Jamal Eigel, was the illustrator for this particular book. Doing some digging, I didn't realize, but there was actually a Kickstarter for the sequel, which is being called White. And the Kickstarter is over, and I believe the book should be coming out fairly soon. If it's not, I didn't quite get a chance to look for it, but it was successfully funded, so that should be coming out soon. Which is great because it sets up an interesting world, but the whole thing is premised on what if black individuals, some, had superpowers, and what would that do to society if it was found out? And what are some of the various, repercussions and sort of a story on how this one character who goes by X, his name is Kareem, how he can, go from that origin story, where he, finds out he has powers to the next thing that happens. So if you're looking for it, Comixology has it. It's on sale, actually. I think it's like $13 for the first trade. 6 issues, lots of characters in this. Oh my gosh. Like, I could spend an hour talking about all of the creative and interesting characters and world building that this book does. And it can be overwhelming. So I would honestly recommend, if you're interested in reading this, take your time. It is also in black and white, which, is fine. The art's fantastic. Jamal's art's always amazing. But the fact that it's not in color sometimes makes you go, okay, wait, that's this person, not this person. I mean, the designs are great, but you can get lost in the people. But the powers are all very interesting. Think like X-Men like type powers, just really novel and interesting, sort of organic to people that having these powers. Some have interesting outfits. Specifically, and some have cute names. There's this character Hood Rat who's got a job, so and some swords, and is like kind of a badass. Mind Grapes, which is this like monkey ape creature, which I know is like, oh, but hey, they know what they're doing. This book is very, I don't know if everyone working on this book was African American, but I will dare tell you that at least the people I've been referring to are all black, and they are very proud, and very rightfully so, and very creative with both current contemporary black culture, but also historical black culture. I found like they would put these the like Selma platoon, Dred Scott base, the 1863 maneuver, which is Gettysburg, like they did all of these kind of cute little, or cute's maybe the wrong word, but like little references to culture in there that obviously talk to the history. So I enjoyed it. It was a lot to go through. Oh, there's a transgender character who's like a jazz singer in New Orleans, and she comes in and has some really cool stuff as kind of an early entry point to some of the adventures that this X character has. X, by the way, I should back up here. Kareem finds his superpowers out in a very unfortunately. I don't know. There's an odd synchronicity to it, but it's unfortunate because it's like historical, and this is kind of the issue we're dealing with even George Floyd. Basically, he and a group of friends are gunned down by cops. So it starts with a literal bang, and the kind of the finding out he has powers comes from that critical moment. But it's very honest about police. There's actually a good police officer, a good detective in this, Detective Waters, who plays a pretty big role, a black African-American woman cop, detective, and she is a critical part of this. So it's not, I would say it's honest about cops. It both talks to this experience of being, gunned down by police because of basically a misunderstanding and, police aggression, but it doesn't just portray all cops as monsters. So it's good about, I think, trying to find sort of a middle or realistic kind of path there. There's a lot of drama with this secret organization from the government, led by this fun, appropriately named Man, Ted Man. So, the man is out to get you kind of deal. There's some family drama between this leader, Marshall, and his. We find out one of his son basically is kind of this more militant group that's trying to kind of work their own agenda, but also to, keep this sort of black superhero thing thriving, whereas the dad's trying to sort of manage it and keep it hidden. It's got a lot. I mean, like I said, I almost felt a little overwhelmed with how many characters and like soap opera-y, comic booky moments this thing had. But that's fun. That's what I want. It both is serious and very relevant, but it also is a fun book about superheroes, but black superheroes, and from a very like I said, that rooted in that community. It feels honest, and it feels important right now of all time. So please, if you haven't checked it out or you kind of passed it over, it was on the shelves, Comixology's got it. I believe they, if you go to their website for the black, I can pull it up here in a second. They Black Super so at Black Superpowers SUPR on all the social media, but Black Superpowers spelled out the way you'd expect.com. They are donating, I think, some portion of their proceeds, if you buy T-shirts right now, to Black Lives Matter. So I don't believe the comic book itself is raising money for that organization, but the merchandise would be, and so that's very good that they're doing that. And yeah, I was not familiar before with Kwanzaa Osaefo or Tim Smith 3. However, I was digging around, and Kwanzaa's done some great stuff for DC before. Of course, Jamal we've talked about on this show many times. Molly Danger is still
actually Jamal just came back to DC for something.
Yeah.
He drew a chapter of the Teen Titans Go to Camp.
That's right. I did read about that.
Yeah, last week that just came out. Yeah.
So I mean, again,
first DC work in years. Yeah.
So yeah, did you guys? Oh, sorry.
Didn't he do Wrong Earth as well over at Ahoy? Was that Jamal?
He did. Yeah, that was Jamal.
Beautiful.
That's Jamal.
God,
beautiful work. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, did you guys read this? Did any of you guys check this out?
No, I think I have a download copy, which I thought I sent to all of you, like I sent the image emails. I think we had a electronic reviewer's copy, and I was just I've never gotten to it. But maybe you've lit the fire now, Bryan.
I hope you like it. I said it hit a lot of bases for me, and especially with the current moment we're experiencing. I wanted this week to really find something, and I was going to talk about Bingo Love. We had talked about that possibly. T. Franklin is a very outspoken queer black comic creator, and I love her stuff. But I know we spent a lot of time talking about her work in the past, and when I had been exposed to this originally, I think I just wasn't in a place where I valued it. Honestly, that's the thing. I didn't seek this kind of thing out, but this week of all weeks has really, and last week as well, has put me in that moment of learning everything I can and trying to understand better and do better. And like this comic hit the spot. It was perfect for many reasons. It reminded me of Hollywood in the sense that it's not a cautionary tale, but it takes a real situation and kind of goes, well, what if? Which is a lot of comics, right? It's the core of escapism. But what if black people had the ability to rise out of the issues currently going on with their own agency of superpowers? So that's an interesting thought experiment, and I'm excited. I really am. I really want to pick up the next volume. There've been some other side series that I was reading about that explore some of the side characters, but I really want to know what happens next with this character of X in his universe. So
cool. Okay, cool.
So hey, Bryan, having not read this, and you mentioned that it's not done in color, that is a black and white book. It seems like, at least like I said, not having read it, that seems to be almost like of course it was purposeful, but it seems like purposeful that it would be a black and white book. Does the absence of color feel that way? Does it seem to play a role in the tone of the book?
I don't think if that was the intent, I don't think that was executed enough. Like, it didn't go far enough to make it a point. The covers are a little bit more playing with that idea. But the actual issues are, because the inking is, really good, and the art, obviously is fantastic. You don't miss the color, but I don't feel like it adds anything artistically. But I mean, that's just my opinion. Anyway, so I don't think if that was the point, I don't think it was like beaten over the head with, it. But
cool. Oh, good rec.
All right, Caleb, how about you? What are you reading that you're digging? Or
So I had intentions this week of kind of pulling a Bryan and reading books that were culturally relevant. Um, and I tried. I was actually going to go back and reread. There's a series going on right now called Philadelphia,
Mm.
um, that is incredibly good. It's a mix of a horror story and everything. I started reading it, and it was again just the time and the fact that we're bombarded with heaviness right now. I couldn't get there. I couldn't get to the headspace I needed to be to really get to it. And again, I say that as in like it sounds like a poor white boy woe is me kind of thing, but it's not. It's just like shit. I can't. Just the pure heaviness of it all. But I just wrapped up so I dove into the escapism. Let me finish that sentence. I dove into the escapism, and I just wrapped up a series that I've been reading for the past 2 months, and that is, and I don't think I've talked about it on the show before, but that's Matt Kent's Mind MGMT. Um, I started reading this about the time that COVID hit. I'd never read it before. I love Matt Kent's work. His work on Two Sisters, his work on Black Hammer 45. Everything he does just really speaks to me. I'm a big mark for books kind of in the Darwin Cook realm, which I think he fits in that family tree. If he's not necessarily a direct analog by any means, but he's inside that realm when it comes to mystery and crime drama. So Mind MGMT, if you have not read it before, there are 6 hardcovers. I highly recommend you seek it out. The main character, her name is Miru, and she's a writer. She is somebody who is, she's trying not to be a one-hit wonder. She's had a really amazing book that did very well, but she keeps coming back to this same idea, and she doesn't know why. And inevitably, she traces it back to this moment on a plane, to this event uh, that was kind of culturally relevant to where everyone on this plane, it's called the amnesia flight. Everyone got off the flight, remembered nothing. And she keeps coming back to this idea, and she wants to write about it, but there's always this writer's block that hits right about the time that she does it. Uh, and she ends up, as she's trying to work on her next novel, she starts to meet people, and things start flooding back to her that don't make any sense. Well, she ends up meeting this character, this person named Henry Lime, um, and Henry Lime starts to feel he's not quite copacetic. There's something going on with Henry, and the more she digs in, the more she leans into the story, she starts to realize that not only is there a block like writer's block, there's a mental block for her. She can't remember past a certain point. And that's because both Miru and Henry are former agents of this clandestine worldwide psychic organization called Mind MGMT. Um, and they worked for no particular government. They knew no boundaries when it came to social borders. They really were the Illuminati figures of the world. They Everything about this clandestine organization dabbled in subversiveness, and as somebody who looks for that in my escapism in my comics, Matt Kent did a job in this book that I can't sing its praises enough. So what the agents of Mind MGMT would do is they aren't leaving messages in bottles around the corner for spot. Like, this isn't the Americans. What they're doing is they are broadcasting the secrets in broad daylight. You see a billboard in Times Square, and it plants a seed in one person, and it's done so purposefully. Um, a book, kind of like Miru writes, it can affect hundreds of thousands of people and make them think a certain way and do a certain thing, or not think a certain way, not do a certain thing. Um, a classified ad in a newspaper triggers a series of events that lead to God knows what. and that's what MGMT did. They really were the Illuminati, but they got too powerful, right? They collapsed in upon themselves, and all the agents scattered. They were all the ones that survived went into hiding, and none more so than Henry Lime. He's kind of the most dangerous person, other than one figure, which you all know how fiction works. Of course, it's Miru. Um, it's not hiding the ball. Might be one of the most dangerous figures and the most powerful figures to work in mind management. And the reason Henry Lime has had to seek out Miru is because there is a figure who's trying to put Mind MGMT back together, but they're not trying to do it in any way um, that is altruistic. Like all good things, Mind MGMT the organization started with very altruistic purposes, and it got corrupted because humans are fallible and inevitably everything is corrupted. Um, and it went off the rails. But now somebody's trying to resurrect it, this clandestine organization with truly unaltruistic purposes. They have no good intentions at heart. And while Henry Lime may be a bastard of the highest proportions, he at least sticks to the thread of having good intentions. And so he's trying to, number one, he's trying to co-opt Miru. He's trying to get her on his side immediately, but he's also trying to keep the enemy from having this incredible asset. And in doing so, they go on these series of adventures that last through, I want to say, 36, maybe 48 issues. Again, I'm not sure how many are in the individual volumes. I've got the 6 hardcovers. They get to a point to where you meet an incredible cast of characters. There is heartbreak, there is betrayal, there's a love story, there's everything. And Matt Kent weaves a web that is truly unbelievable, using all of the amazing tropes of all of the spy stories that you've ever read, of all the crime stories you've ever read. He's not afraid to wear his influences on his sleeves, but he elevates it. Again, like we were talking about earlier, it's not derivative at all. It's something brand new, and he does so in a manner that, number one, you've got Matt Kent's gorgeous cartooning, right? His flawless watercolors, his color palette, his tone, everything is phenomenal. But each page in the book, you can see there's little blue line writing in it, and that's on each and every single page. There's subversive messaging within the text of the book, outside of the story. So he's taking this idea of hidden messages, of mental influence, of advertising, and he's lacing it into this story all throughout the series. It's metatextual as hell, and as somebody who thinks that, on one hand, I do look for comics for escapism. On the other hand, I try to look at comics academically. I try to look at the way that comics work as a medium, as the way that comic works as a storytelling device, and the way that it can do things that no other medium can do. And I think with Mind MGMT, Matt Kent really tapped into something that had not been done before, um, or had not been done in a way that both obscured it and pronounced it at the same time. It's fascinating to me, the work that was done in this book. So, again, check it out. It's, you can look at it academically. You can look at it as just a really dumb, fun story with psychics and a guy who can kill people with his finger, and a bunch of twins, and somebody with 2 heads. Or you can just look at the pages in and of themselves, and you can see what Matt Kent is doing, and the way that he is allowing you to see the possibilities of the metatextual, um, visual and physical medium of comics. And it's jaw dropping. It truly is. And for a little bit in the past 2 months, prior to this week, but in the middle of COVID and everything else, I was able to submerge myself in this series. and for a while just geek out, and that was cool.
That's cool. I've only read a few things from Matt Kint that are his own creations. So Mind Management I haven't read, but I've read some of his other spy based works, and of course the stuff that he's done for Valiant and a couple other imprints. It's been pretty cool,
Mhm.
but I definitely don't know why I haven't read any of Mind Management yet.
I have the first hardcover. I've never
I don't know
read
why
it.
I haven't
Yeah.
opened up those books. It's like
Yeah.
I
I don't even know
should be.
how I came across it. May have been on a recommendation, but someday.
So
Yes.
I'll say it's a slow burn.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's not so. There are some moments in this that are truly action packed and fast paced, and cling onto the edge of your seats. But the beauty of the book is in the slow burn.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like I don't know if he's like Charlie from Philadelphia, but I can just see his web of things mapping out the connections in this. Um, he
Right
does
here.
something similar to maybe what Jonathan Hickman does, but he does it in a different way.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I was
like
just really
the
thrown by your um comparison to Darwin Cook because I've never picked up on that vibe at all.
really,
Yeah,
I
at a,
think
like not a shred. I mean, if you're referencing the mystery, I guess because I am unfamiliar with the Parker books, but I don't see that as I see that as Darwin Cook interpreting somebody else.
Mm.
He's just not an artist that I would necessarily. I would lump him more with James Stocco or some other people like that.
he
Um,
doesn't have nearly the
yeah,
detail to Stocco
yeah.
and I've heard that before.
Hmm.
He's more so. I think if I was trying to make a direct connect to another artist, I would say he's probably more in line with a Tyler Crook from Harrow County or something
Mhm.
like that. Just watercolor based.
Maybe even Lemire. Lemire's art.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
yeah,
definitely
definitely
Yeah.
Lemire.
Lemire.
Definitely Lemire.
Definitely
Yeah.
Lemire. Where I was, I think, and again because of Two Sisters, I think I think Matt Kent is to spy books
Hmm.
what Cook was to crime books for me and the work that I've read.
Possibly.
But I also
Well,
think
what do
if
you
you take
consider apart from Parker? What do you consider the crime books for?
his Catwoman, um,
Okay.
that to me dealt a lot of it. Let's see. As I'm looking at my shelf right now, all of the Parker books. But I also think some of the connective tissue is in the love of like the tone of pulp.
Hmm.
So if you were to read if you're to read Cook's New Frontier, very pulp oriented, and then
Well,
you go
man, we can go on this all night. I don't agree with that at all. I
okay,
don't agree with that at all. Um, I see that as with the no, I just don't see it. I just don't
really
see it. But it may be what our definitions and our perceptions of what pulp is comes down to.
Hmm.
right,
Because for me, pulp is very restrictive. It's the premier characters that grew out of that time period. Uh, Maybe some influence from film noir, maybe some influence from radio dramas, but I don't see any connective tissue between those type of characters and um, what's presented in New Frontier. To me, New Frontier is atomic age as it could be, and that's not pulp for me.
okay,
Yeah.
Going back to Kint, I did read a lot of. I didn't complete it, but Department H
mm-hmm.
or Depth, which was sort of his version of a sort of an underwater mystery horror. Um,
Are they connected at all?
I think there
His work.
isn't there supposed to be some connection there between
Because I thought
because I
there
didn't
was
read
with
Mind
that
MGMT.
series. Yeah, I thought there
Yeah.
was some connection.
I
Not saying it's a sequel or
No,
I
just
think it's
some.
loose. I think it's all
Yeah.
supposed to be in the same universe,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's a. So I haven't finished Department H, and I need to,
Mhm.
but I have not. And what I've read of Department H, I haven't seen it where it's like directly um, in that world, but I think it very easily fits into that world. And I could be completely wrong. I mean, I'm sure folks who have read it who see that connection are like, oh no, it's absolutely the same thing. I haven't seen that.
Well, it flirts a lot with that sort of who can you trust?
Right.
What's the real motivation behind these characters? Because there's a lot. I mean, you do see it from the perspective of, of one character, but there's a lot of other facets to the understanding of what the other characters are, what they're supposed to be, what they're doing. Um, and again, I'm just kind of guessing based on what you've been saying about mind management, that there's a lot of that sort of play of how much that Kint is presenting of a particular character or character
Mhm.
set can you trust is actually accurate, and that he isn't just setting the reader up to kind of believe a certain way or think a certain thing about a character just so he can you know flip
Yeah.
it around at some point. No, that's cool. I do need to go back to read Mind Management.
I think you dig it.
okay, cool. Uh, I was in the same boat as Bryan, but I took a different tact, and I probably found the one book that had social relevance in what's going on in this day and age without it touching on racial issues somehow.
Hmm.
Um, and I refrained about talking about this book for a long time just because it's not out yet. I don't know how this happened. Somehow I'm on one of Durf's lists, and I fell in love with my friend Dahmer. Was made into a terrific movie too, if you've ever seen that. It is on some of the streaming services now.
And an
But
Archie connection, isn't there? Or an Archie Comics connection with the movie version of My Friend Dom?
yeah, but that's tiny. And it's a graphic novel written by Durf, who was a fellow high school student and at a point friend of Jeffrey Dahmer. He has a book coming out based on the Kent State shootings called Kent State. This is, again, I don't know how I get galleys, but somehow I got galleys for these two. This is it was initially supposed to go on sale in April 2020 on sale, which would have been in time for the May. Oh, I want to get that date right because it's important. The May 4th shooting of students on the Kent State campus. Unfortunately, because of coronavirus and some other factors, this release has been delayed until. Oh, let me. Now I lost you guys. Hold on a second. How did this? Now I just got Steve. Jeez, I don't want just Steve.
Oh, well, thanks.
There we go. Okay. So, unfortunately, this has been pushed back to September. There is a connection for our show. One of our past guests. This is past guest and friend of the show night. Chris
Name
Roman.
drop.
Yeah,
Name
Chris
drop.
Roman is a professor of medieval literature and queer studies over at Kent State. And as I said, it details the shootings that took place on May 4th, 1970. On the Kent State campus. It is it's a very uh, dense read. I'll just show you some of the pages. It took me a while to get through this, but it really paints the picture of what I think probably many college campuses were like at that time, but it goes into things that I wouldn't normally think something would go to. It goes into the club scene that was at Kent State. One of the people, Jeffrey Miller, who was the shot and is the subject of that very famous photo with Marianne Del Vecchio, like this, Pulitzer Prize winning photo by John Piso. He was in a band, and it goes into the live music scene there, It goes into what led up to everything about, the tension of there being a ROTC chapter, ROTC on campus, which was a huge bone of contention in the early 70s in many college campuses. It doesn't portray the National Guard as monolithic cookie cutter people. These were kids that were the same age as the people that were on campus. It's really a wonderful piece. And again, I really held back on this one because of it not coming out. I don't like to talk about things that are that far in advance, and I don't want to come off as like, well, he is a galley, he's special. I'm not special.
Special to us.
But there were so many things that this covers of, why there wasn't that big an African American presence as part of the protest, because the local National Guard had a terrible reputation in riots that had happened in Cleveland earlier that year. It goes into so many things that are integral to the story, but you don't think would be integral to the story. Restaurants people ate at, and some of the connections. Two fairly famous rock stars were part of that protest, and in Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders, and not Mark Mothersbaugh, Bob Casale from Devo. One of the people that was shot was 15 feet away from Bob. And just in terms of providing a snapshot of why people were protesting, against the Vietnam War and against military operations and other capacities. This is foreign to me too, though I'm the oldest of the four of us. I was 2.5 years old when this took place. So everything, that I know about it is secondhand, whether it's the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song, or graffiti that existed in Wayne, New Jersey for 15 years that said 4 dead in Ohio. And I sometimes enjoy books that provide a history lesson. Especially comic books, graphic novels that provide a history lesson, because I've never gone into education, but one thing that I think is integral to learning is when you're laughing, you're learning, and when you're entertained, you're learning. And somehow, out of a terrible, terrible tragedy comes this entertaining book, and this dude did his work. I mean, the annotations over here. I wouldn't hesitate if I were a professor using this as a textbook. It's that comprehensive, and in terms of the comparisons to this and My Friend Dahmer is a highly personalized story. By all indications, Durf's interest in this only came when he moved to Ohio. So there wasn't that personal connection, but you would swear he was related to one of the 4 people that was killed. And also goes into the other people that were shot. One of the ROTC people were shot. Again, you say 4 dead. One of the people that was shot was paralyzed for life. Another lost a foot. I've never heard those stories before. And and particularly the depictions of like a college professor who was so important in quelling the tension after everything went down, and basically implored both sides to just walk away, and they did. It's a very moving book, and when this does come out in September, I hope you all get it, because it's really good.
Yeah.
And in this time period, again, the Kent State shootings was a time in America that was a very definitive before and after in terms of anti-war sentiment. And again, like we are experiencing now with the video of George Floyd's killing, it was principally that Pulitzer Prize, say that 10 times fast, Pulitzer Prize winning photo of the woman that actually she was only 14 years old, standing over the body, that changed even very conservative minds about how we were treating protesters. And everything old is new again. And I think this is a very important book, and I do hope people sample that when it comes out in September.
Well, I mean, Durf. I've loved Durf stuff since he used to do his little one-panel strips.
The City? Yeah.
Which I love his style. His style is very comics with an X, like very inspired from 70s and 80s, early 80s style. Weird people, bizarre attributes, and
give you taste there.
Just love it. I just love it. But he is very detailed. He's very thorough. And just reading his stuff with my friend Dahmer, which is a great example, but like any other time, even with The City and like his notes when he would publish a comic, like he would go into a lot of description. He would really talk a lot about his inspiration and the meaning behind the stuff that he does. But I mean, looking at that, I mean, that's even beyond. I mean, this looks like the book that somebody would write if this was their life work. This is going to be my textbook. This is going to be my, like, what I'm publishing for my thesis kind of thing.
It does feel like
my PhD.
I mean, I'm not going to compare it to things like Mouse or Bone in terms of being somebody's definitive work, but if this ends up being his definitive work, I think he'd be just fine with that. It really is a tremendous piece of fiction. Nonfiction. Nonfiction. These are unreal times. Sorry about that, folks. All right, Brian's probably thinking about dinner and wiping sleepers out of his eyes. And for me and Steve, it's 11:17 p.m. So I think we have to wrap this one up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. This is where we spotlight something that might be a comic book, but it also might be a film or a television program or a charitable initiative. Anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. We'll continue with the route that we went, starting with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, my woof of the week is going to be sort of a throwback or maybe a callback to something that we had highlighted on the show about a year ago, called the OGNs Anthology. And it was a Kickstarter from our friend of the show,
friend of the show,
John Horsley, and a team of great writers and artists that were all contributing to this anthology. And this past week, not this week, but the week before, the digital copies were just released. So obviously it did met its goal. It's been a little while coming, but the digital versions are out. The digital rewards have been sent out to anybody who contributed. So if you're listening and you contribute to this, then you should be able to get a hold of your digital copy of the OGNs Anthology. And then also printed copies should be coming within the next, I think John had mentioned something within the next couple of months or so, possibly towards the end of the summer.
I get the printed.
Yeah, I get the printed too, so I'll be getting it.
But
I'll probably be talking about more. I think we'll probably be talking about more in depth as maybe one of the comics that we've read on our weekly recommendations. But I think just wanted to call a shout out and a woof to the release of this digitally, and we'll talk about it more in the future.
Since we're on the subject of John and his podcast, Spoiler Country, do you think we should mention that particular T-shirt?
Yes. We should be mentioning. I think there's actually 2 T-shirts now. The the Spoiler Country Podcast Network has just put out a couple designs for Pride Month, supporting Pride initiatives, and it's a beautiful design. We might be able to link to it when we post the show, but basically they put out a very special design, very cool design for Spoiler Country for this month's Pride, and proceeds from the T-shirts sales are going to be going to charity initiative. I believe it's the Trevor Project.
Trevor Project, yes, I believe.
Yes. So if you do want to support them, if you're a listener of their podcast over there, you want to support them and also show your pride for Pride Month, go and check it out.
Mm-hmm. And also, this is a shirt that can be worn year round.
Yes,
definitely.
Always year round.
Awesome. Wait till you guys see it. Okay, Brian, how about you? What's your wolf of the week?
So I want to talk about the 8 Can't Wait initiative. If you Google 8, the number, and Can't Wait, it is a project by Campaign Zero to get policing abuses / aggressive and excessive violent forces reined in a bit. And what's nice is it's a very easy site for you to look up which of the 8 things, like chokeholds, escalation, requiring de-escalation, requiring warning before shooting, like just really good minimums. They're not enough, let's say, to completely fix systematic racism and all this other stuff, but to at least get the police to have a set of sort of requirements that they have to do. You can look up to see if your city has any of them in place. And then it gives you a nice form that you can use. It produces graphics that you can share on social media and gives you scripts if you need to call. It gives you multiple ways to get involved civically, to ask your city to consider these efforts. I was very proud of Seattle. We had all but 2. I did not look up other cities. I should probably look up a couple others that I'm curious about now. But Orlando has 5 of the 8. That's, it's okay. I'm sorry. Wait, they have 3 of the 8. My bad. Yeah, that makes more sense. Anyway, 8cantwait.org. Check it out. And again, this is just one thing you can do. If you can't go to the rallies, you can donate. There's all kinds of great stuff. Go look up Black Lives Matter. But 8 Can't Wait, definitely very important right now in this moment to try to get some real reform out there in the law enforcement communities.
That's interesting. I just looked up Winston-Salem. We have 4 of these. We require de-escalation, warning before shooting. We have the use of force continuum and comprehensive reporting. But interestingly enough, chokeholds and strangleholds are not banned. Neither are shooting at moving vehicles. That's an interesting one that I wasn't really thinking of. I think of more of like, action movies, shooting at vehicles. So, but it is a thing. So, that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
My wolf of the week is kind of similar to Brian's. This week has shown, a lot of people have known that judicial reform is necessary, but this is not new. This is a decade. This is generational. As one of my friends put it, multi generations have dealt with injustice and inequality, and there is of course, me being where I'm at in life, I'm very interested in how the legal field plays into this. And so my wolf of the week is the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project goes and it looks at cases where people have been railroaded through the justice system, and where in many cases junk science has gotten people put behind bars. Junk science coupled with just our culture has gotten people's freedom taken away, and has gotten their lives taken away in many cases, where innocent people have been put on death row for things that they didn't do. And the Innocence Project goes back and they use new science. They use advancements that we've made to get these people free. Um, Sadly, they don't have a 100% success rate. That's not their, but they try, which is I think all you can is the minimum that you can do, and they are diligent in their efforts to get people out to reinstate their freedom, especially communities that are adversely affected by this, like black and brown communities, like minority communities all across the board. Um, and so I think they deserve a huge salute for their efforts. And if you go to their website, innocenceproject.org, which I've got on the sticky tab, you can donate. I know right now, number one, we're in a weird spot in the world where not only are we dealing with a pandemic and insane socio-political crises, we're also dealing with a very, very large economic drought, so to speak, because of those things. And there are a lot of people who are vying for your monetary donations, your attention, and everything else. If you have it, donate to the Innocence Project. If you don't, that's okay. And I think that's true for anything, right? But check it out. Give it a look. Maybe it's a thing that's for you. And I think that's something we can all support, because innocent people should not lose their freedom because of junk science and because of bad socioeconomic policies.
Okay, cool. Do you know Ray LaPlaca? Caleb, he's in gay bear circles. He
No,
does
I
work with
don't.
Innocent Project, or did. Um, he's a public advocate most of the time. Um, I'll see if he's still at the same thing. I think you dig him.
Okay.
Um, if you can also stand that he's a Fish fan. So
I like 75-minute solos. Who doesn't?
well, music relates to my Woof of the Week. And my Woof of the Week goes out to the English glam rock band of the early 70s known as Sweet. Unfortunately, on the day that we are recording this, which is June 4th, 2020, it was announced that Steve Priest, the bassist of the band, has passed away. If you are looking for something that's sort of David Bowie light, it's a great catalog to explore. Again, Ballroom Blitz still has a big presence in our culture, in our pop culture, and it was very refreshing to see with the release of the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie that Fox on the Run had a bit of a resurgence there. Really great music. Specifically, I would recommend that people seek out their album Desolation Boulevard. When Pete Townsend praised the album in a modern day context, that is sort of like, I don't know, Tame Impala giving, Ed Sheeran props. It's something that seemed very lightweight that finally had some denseness to it. Just some great pop oriented rock, and tons of greatest hits collections are out there. Unfortunately, my collection, Sweet are supposed to be over there and they're not there, so I'm upset. So it's bad me. Have to reorganize already, because things are not where they should be. It'd be very easier for me to put out a CD for you to show. But almost all of their principal catalog is on Spotify. So if you are familiar with the hits like the two that I mentioned, or Little Willie, or Love Is Like Oxygen, there's also some great songs that are under that surface that those hits occupy. So please check that out. And again, rest in peace, Steve Priest. Okay. We have wrapped up another episode of the Comic Book Bears Up. Again, we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comics, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in. If you want to, you can subscribe to us through iTunes. You can listen to us through Stitcher Radio, and you can still catch us on some of the podcatching platforms. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. We are Comic Book Bears Podcast on Facebook, and if you want to check us out on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram, we are Comic Book Bears. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Out of nowhere, you're going to hear a wolf and an explosion. We'll be back next week. We'll be back next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Ah.